who needs nuclear weapons when you've got the Strait of Hormuz? Sure, ordinary Iranians are far worse off than they were on February the 28th when the U.S. and Israel launched a war that killed the supreme leader on day one. But the Islamic Republic since discovered it's got leverage beyond its wildest dreams, and betting that Donald Trump's threats of invasion are empty. Iran's leadership can even paint the U.S. president as the bad guy when he threatens a 20% toll on commercial vessels passing through the strait. That was Monday, by the way. He's since reversed himself. And then there's the bewilderment of the rest of the planet, with missiles flying across the Gulf as crude climbs to 4-week highs. A broader question: why this cycle of war, talks, televised signing ceremonies, and then a return to hostilities? Are we reduced to spectators in this pattern of performative drama? And how to break that cycle? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking about war talks and repeat if necessary. With us, Karim Emile Bitar, professor at St. Joseph University in Beirut and the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Thanks for being with us.
Good evening, François.
From Washington, Carrie Lee, senior fellow at the German Marshall Fund think tank's Democracy and Security Network. Good to see you again.
Good evening.
And from Chicago, Borzo Daragahi, host and editor of the Badlands Substack page. How are things?
Great. Thank you for having me.
By the way, if you're on the go, you can listen to the show wherever the France 24 debate is streamed. Yeah, the show must go on. Donald Trump is going to be giving a primetime televised address on Thursday. A lot of water will have since flown through that Strait of Hormuz, what with the United States Military Command announcing 4 p.m. Washington time as the time it will resume blockading maritime traffic entering and exiting Iranian ports. But it is also saying that they're not going to impose a 20% tariff, which spooked markets on Monday. Borzo Daragahi, it's difficult to keep up. One day it's black, the next it's white.
Yeah, I mean, it's been from the very beginning a war in search of a strategy and a rationale. And Donald Trump is not an ordinary person. He has clear, I don't know how else to put this, psychological issues. He needs praise. He needs affirmation that what he's doing is the right thing. And so he starts a war. He gets bad coverage on Fox. He ends the war. He gets bad coverage on a different channel. He starts it up again. He gets criticism here and there. This is not about strategy. It's about optics and the narcissism of one man. And that is something really hard for mediators to deal with. It's something hard for his own foreign policy staff to deal with. And it's something also rather difficult for the Iranians to deal with, despite their many complexities and many defects. When it comes to this kind of diplomatic negotiation, they're kind of experienced and they're kind of normal. They've dealt with this before. They did do a nuclear deal with the United States. And so everything about this process has been abnormal.
Carrie Lee, listening to Borzo, it sounds like it's one-man rule in the United States?
So, what I think is happening is the Trump administration is discovering in real time through trial and error all of the things that are well known to make peacemaking difficult, right? There's issues of issue indivisibility. The US stated goals is regime change. The Iranian regime is never going to agree to that. You have commitment problems. Every time you have a ceasefire, Iran rearms and is able to rearm much faster than the United States is to retaliate. You have spoiler groups in the Israeli question and calling in your allies. And then you have the issue of domestic politics, both in the United States with Trump's domestic constituency, but then also in Iranian domestic constituency. And the administration has proven time and time again that it simply cannot and does not choose to acknowledge that other leaders have domestic politics that they have to attend to as well. And so as they stumble through peace deal after peace deal after peace deal, they keep running into these completely foreseeable issues. But it's just symptomatic of some very bad decision making and very bad information processes that are going on inside the White House right now.
Yeah, but is it one-man rule, Carrie?
I don't think you want to say one man rule. I think it's a series of it's a very bad decision making process, right? I don't think Trump is necessarily the only one calling the shots. He's surrounded himself with people who are afraid to tell him bad news, for sure. But if someone were to step into the Oval Office, Trump during his first administration was more than willing to listen and be able to be talked down off of things. The problem is that there's no one in his inner circle right now who's performing that function.
Right, and so we have is ratings-driven politics, which I guess is the same everywhere. Politicians always pay attention to the polls and to television ratings. Karim Emile Bittard, though, it's a little exhausting.
Yes, we can say that it's the same all over the world, but when we live in the Middle East and we see that it's trial and error in DC and we are trying to figure out whether it's a one-man psychology causing all this trouble or a series of diplomatic mistakes, it doesn't change much. Our lives are becoming increasingly chaotic. People are dying every single day. And we are witnessing a genuine escalation trap. It's becoming eerily reminiscent. You know the book about World War I, the Sleepwalkers by Christopher Clark? He reminded us that none of the European leaders wanted a war. But because of a series of misperceptions, domestic political pressure, fear of encirclement, we ended up in a situation where no one controlled anything. And this is what is happening today. And I agree with Borzou, we cannot simply forget about Trump's psychology. For the past 20 or 30 years, we forgot that leaders' psychology were very important. Now we are back to the era of the 17th century. You have to wonder, did Peter the Great wake up in a good mood? Did Catherine II is well disposed today? Or is he going to trigger a new war? So Trump's narcissism, his ego, his tendency to listen to the last person who spoke, and I think Lindsey Graham might have contributed to killing this Iran-US MOU before he died himself. And the reason this deal died, because it was actually a truce framework masquerading as a peace settlement. It was never really a peace settlement with clear enforcement mechanisms, with clear sequencing. So it was bound to fail.
All right, and you talk about this sort of domino effect, akin to World War I. An archduke is killed in Sarajevo, and then World War, it escalates into World War. So let me ask you, because a lot of the attention of those in the region the last 24 hours has been on Yemen. Houthi-backed militias launching drones at Saudi Arabia's international airport on Monday in the south. This in retaliation for strikes that struck Sana'a. Is that part of this puzzle? Or is it just separate?
No, it's definitely part of this puzzle. We are dealing with one giant interconnected theater. The Strait of Hormuz, the debate on the toll of the Strait of Hormuz, we have to keep in mind that it's not about money. Obviously, it can get Iran $8 to $10 billion a year. But the key point for Iran is to let everyone know that they emerged as the political and military gatekeepers of the Gulf. This is what they are trying to show. And now that the United States has allowed the Saudis to hit at the Houthis in Yemen, we might see a similar situation in Bab el-Mandeb. And this will have massive repercussions on the world economy. So with the Strait of Hormuz, Iran found out that it had weapons of mass disturbance. Maybe it's not a nuclear weapon, it's not a weapon of mass destruction, but they can single-handedly slow down the entire world's economy. And this, again, was perfectly predictable, and yet Donald Trump thought it would be a done deal in 3 days. He initially thought that it would take 3 days. Then he said 4 weeks, and now we are entering a new period, and it could become the new normal. This war could end up taking years.
Could end up taking years, Borzou Daragahi?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this could go on for years and years. I think the problem is that there is a constituency in Washington, very powerful constituency, that has always wanted this war. They have always lobbied for this conflict, and they have their tenterhooks in this administration, in part because the administration doesn't have any other alternative that it sees. It's basically blocked out many voices. It has, as the person from the German Marshall Fund alluded, sort of short-circuited the normal policy process that has guided U.S. presidents and foreign policy apparatuses for many decades. It is basically getting this sort of line that the only way to deal with Iran is by overthrowing the regime, and they're girding the American public for that to some extent. There was an article in the New York Times in which it was basically justifying attacks on civilian infrastructure in Iran, including steel factories and other civilian infrastructure, calling basically everything dual use. And the people who were quoted in that article were the same people who have been guiding the Trump administration on this rather unproductive and destructive path.
So, Carrie Lee, that's interesting because the war began on February the 28th. At those hawkish think tanks inside of the Beltway, are they giving the situation a second look? Is there any kind of introspection?
I think there's a number of folks who were initially very supportive of this conflict who are now beginning to reevaluate its utility. And that's because what we've discovered is that the war will continue to go on until the fundamentals are changed, right? I do not tend to subscribe to this theory that wars start and then they spiral and they can't be ended. What happens is both sides have to believe that continued fighting and continued conflict and reigniting the conflict time after time after time is gaining them something in the negotiations. So World War I began, but it didn't end, because the two sides couldn't control themselves. World War I ended when all sides discovered that fighting was no longer in their interest. Right now, both Iran and the United States seem to think that reigniting the conflict and continuing to fight gains them something and gains them leverage in the negotiation. Iran, because it can demonstrate that it has asymmetric advantages in the Strait of Hormuz, and the United States, because in my opinion, they're trying to buy time until the midterm elections. Because this is a highly unpopular war and the price of oil and gas here in the United States is an extraordinarily powerful predictor of vote choice. And so right now, it appears that the administration sees continued conflict as a way to either buy time or gain leverage in pursuit of a peace deal. Around Washington, D.C., I think there are a number of senators and politicians, especially, who are initially supportive, who recognize this and want to see a way out.
Is there a scenario in which actually right now the rest of the world's on tenterhooks, but people inside of the White House and people inside of the high halls of power in Tehran have an interest in the current state of play, half war, half talks?
You're asking me?
Yes, Carrie.
So I think to some degree, yes, in part because the administration is somewhat insulated from broader US public opinion. And is very responsive to a particular subsection of the Republican Party and their base. That being said, this war is unpopular with them, with that base as well. So what I think is happening with the administration is they're playing this very delicate balancing act where they're trying to satisfy general public opinion around the economic implications of the war and the conflict, while also trying to end it on a favorable term so that they can satisfy these different domestic constituencies and claim that they got a win.
There's talks taking place in Rome, Emile Bitar, between Israel and Lebanon, and they're actually, both sides seem to be saying that the talks are going, okay. Those are brokered by the United States. Is some good coming of all of this?
I don't see anything good coming out of it. It's pretty much what happened with the Oslo agreements in the 1990s. Initially, everyone was optimistic. Then we realized that what was supposed to be a peace process became simply a process where we had endless discussions. And what we have here is that we do not have seasoned negotiators. We have basically deals that are negotiated by Trump's golfing buddies or real estate brokers actors with little understanding of local politics, of the incentives of the actors, of the balance of power. So the Lebanese authorities got their hand twisted. They agreed to sign an agreement that lacks sequencing, that has no calendar, that does not mention Israeli withdrawal. And now they are trying to do some damage control. And the Lebanese president will be visiting Donald Trump next week to put some pressure on the Americans so that they can get the Israelis to make some concessions and agree to withdraw at least from certain parts of South Lebanon.
Borzou Dargahi, let me ask you, with everything in flux all the time now, are there going to be more of these sort of big signing ceremonies to come? We had it with Gaza. We had it with Rwanda and DRC. We had it at the beginning of the year with that Board of Peace, each time the head of FIFA, by the way, showing up. Is that still going to happen anymore? Or is perhaps Donald Trump really going to be a lame duck president come November, and that's no longer going to be possible?
I think there could be possibly some kinds of diplomatic negotiations going on. And I think that Donald Trump seems to like these sorts of ceremonies, and his aides and others around him, his sycophants, including some world leaders, and even some heads of sports associations, seem to like orchestrating these kinds of little events that boost his ego and give him a little dopamine fix, make him feel like a big man and a peacemaker, as we all know his dream of getting a Nobel Peace Prize. I think that what is more pertinent is just how much ordinary people are going to suffer from this. I mean, I'm by ordinary people, I'm speaking mostly at this point. The priority should be the countries of the Far East that are super dependent on oil and natural gas flows coming out of the Persian Gulf. That this blockade seems to not take their interests into account whatsoever. And yeah, I mean, I think the West, the collective West, can handle gas that is whatever, $4, $5 a gallon, €1.50 a liter. That's the equivalent of that. And so I think that could be potentially something that those countries can handle and the United States can handle. But I think there's a lot of fragile economies and fragile households around the world that will be crushed by this conflict as it goes on, especially since the peace agreements and the peace accords that are signed often lead to naught.
Here in Europe, we've got an eye on two wars. Performative politics, we were talking about it, coming into play this Bastille Day. Today's France's national holiday, in the form of a coalition of the willing troops. Thank you. Participating in the annual military parade in Paris under the eye of nearly 24 leaders, including, you saw him there, Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky. It was quite emotional when you saw the Ukrainian forces, Karim Bitar, walking down. Is that the best the middle powers can do, stage a parade? Or is there anything they can do when it comes to what's going on in the Gulf?
Well,
can they collectively weigh in?
We've seen much worse. I'm old enough to remember in 2008, Nicolas Sarkozy was president and he invited all Middle Eastern despots to the Champs-Élysées Bastille Day. We had Bashar al-Assad, we had Hosni Mubarak of Egypt, Ben Ali of Tunisia. So today some people are criticizing Macron because he invited the Ukrainians. I'd rather see a coalition of some countries trying to support the Ukrainians than see a bunch of dictators parading in Paris. And
to Borzou's point, can they do something about the Middle East?
I'm not absolutely sure. Europe has become a marginal player because it has decided to marginalize itself because of its divisions, because it has been unable to speak truth to power, to speak truth to Donald Trump, mostly with the exception of a few European leaders. I'm speaking of Pedro Sanchez. They could join forces with Canada, with Mark Carney, with the Vatican, with some other actors who do not want to live in a world of Machtpolitik, of cowboy diplomacy that brought us there.
And I will leave it there, unfortunately. Thank you for being with us for this abridged edition, Karim Bitar. I want to thank Carrie Lee for being with us from Washington, Borzou Dargahi in Chicago. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.